May 6, 1937, Lakehurst, New Jersey. A large crowd has gathered today to witness a more spectacular piece of modern engineering. The Hindenburg had left Frankfurt, Germany on May 3rd and had made stops in Belgium, France, and finally Newfoundland, before reaching The Zeppelin had suffered a small hydrogen leak during the trip, but it wasn't enough to cause concern. This was even endorsed by famous figures like Thomas Edison. He said, quote, "I think the future of flight is with different." They had to go, and so the ship began to move. At 6:19 p.m., the Hindenburg took off from Lakehurst with 36 passengers and 12 crew members on board. The airship then headed out into the storm. All aboard prayed that they would make it through the storm. They stood on rooftops and trees and did whatever they could to get a better view. The survivors were understandably traumatized by the experience. Many of them had witnessed the death of their friends and family. Others had been burned or cut by the wreckage. But despite their injuries, many of the survivors felt fortunate to be alive. Visibility was extremely poor, and the Hindenburg was being tossed around in the winds. The airship's path was erratic and dangerous. It is amazing to think that such a powerful symbol of German engineering could have such a lasting impact on the world. The Hindenburg disaster was a tragedy, but it was also a pivotal moment in the history of aviation. It led to the development of new safety regulations, new forms of transportation, and a new era of exploration. Some even went as far as to say that the Hindenburg was deliberately destroyed by the Nazis. This allowed people around the world to witness the tragedy as it unfolded. It is hard to imagine how terrifying it must have been to listen to the screams of the passengers and the crackle of the flames. The Hindenburg disaster was a tragedy, but it is also a reminder of the power of human ingenuity and the importance of safety in aviation. The storm that it encountered caused the airship to become unbalanced and the gas leak to occur. Do you think they'll ever make a comeback? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Thank you for watching. Until next time. Additionally, the airship was not properly equipped to deal with the storm. Its fabric was old, and its engines were not powerful enough. In short, the Hindenburg was a victim of bad luck, but it was also a victim of German hubris. The Germans believed that they had created the ultimate flying machine. They failed to consider the possibility that it could be destroyed. However, these claims were later disproven. An investigation revealed that the disaster was caused by a combination of factors. The main cause was a gas leak in the starboard tail fin. This caused the gases inside of the ship to become unbalanced, and the airship began to tilt dangerously. There was a loud explosion, and suddenly the entire airship was engulfed in flames. The fire spread rapidly, and soon the entire airship was destroyed. Ironically, he died in 1931, which was 4 years before the Hindenburg disaster. A gas leak had developed in the starboard tail fin. They were no longer considered to be a safe or practical form of transportation. The Zeppelin had been dealt a death blow. No one could have predicted the impact that this disaster would have on the future of aviation. For one, the Hindenburg disaster led to the development of new safety regulations for airships. These regulations made it more difficult for airships to travel internationally. As a result, the popularity of airships declined rapidly. Additionally, the disaster led to the development of new forms of transportation, such as jet aircraft. These new forms of transportation were faster and more efficient than airships, which led to their rapid decline in popularity. Hydrogen gas began to seep out of the seams in the fabric. This caused the gases inside of the ship to become unbalanced, and the airship began to tilt dangerously. There was a loud explosion, and suddenly the entire airship was engulfed in flames. Within seconds, the entire airship was a fiery ball. The fire spread rapidly, and soon the entire airship was destroyed. People on the ground watched in horror as the Hindenburg went up in flames. The airship was so huge that the fire could be seen for miles. Anyway, the passengers of the Hindenburg were excited to board the vessel. Most of them were wealthy individuals who could afford such a luxurious way of traveling. They boarded the ship expecting to have a wonderful time, but instead they would end up witnessing a tragedy. It also made the flight much longer than planned, and once they arrived in Lakehurst, the crew knew that the weather conditions were not good. Storms were rolling in and visibility was poor. Captain Max Prussian decided to wait a day before attempting to land. Unfortunately, this would prove fatal. They are expecting to see a new airship land, a passenger liner that will bring luxury travel to the masses. Despite the fact that the airship was essentially a giant fireball, only a few people were injured. One passenger perished, along with 12 of the 36 passengers. The survivors quickly exited the burning ship and descended onto the ground. The scene was pure chaos. Passengers ran around screaming and others stood in shock. Some tried to help others, while others simply looked on in horror. The scene was so chaotic that it was difficult to determine who needed help and who didn't. It was every man for himself. The largest and most luxurious of its kind, the LZ-129 Hindenburg, will be landing just outside of New York City at the Naval Air Station Lake. The Zeppelin is supposed to be the future of travel, an iconic symbol of German engineering. But unfortunately for all involved, this airship would go down in flames. And the worst part is that the whole thing was broadcast live over the radio. Today, we're taking a look at the aftermath of the Hindenburg disaster. You won't want to miss this one. The airships had been traveling across the Atlantic for weeks now. On May 6th, the Hindenburg was scheduled to leave Lakehurst and head back to Germany, but due to bad weather, this plan was scrapped. The passengers were informed that they would have to stay another night in New Jersey. The passengers were disappointed, but what could they do? The Hindenburg was their only way of getting home. By now, the Hindenburg was a common sight. They first began construction on this airship back in 1934, and it took 2 years to complete. It was built by the German company Zeppelin, and was considered the most luxurious flying machine ever created. It was 800 feet long and 135 feet wide. It had a capacity of 72 passengers and was powered by 5 diesel engines. Its top speed was 135 miles per hour. While these specs may sound impressive, keep in mind that this was during the early days of aviation. This was before jet planes were commonplace and airships were still being built. For some reason, people seemed to think that airships were safe and that they would become the next big thing in transportation. On May 6th, the Hindenburg was preparing to take off. The passengers and crew were very uneasy about leaving during such poor weather conditions. But what choice did they have? Then suddenly, when the airship was 200 feet above the ground, something terrible happened. But believe it or not, things could have been much worse. The survivors quickly found themselves surrounded by curious onlookers. People came from all over to see the burning airship. News of the disaster quickly spread around the world. Newspapers were quick to blame the Germans for the disaster, but there was more to the story. The Hindenburg was designed to fly in calm weather conditions. The Hindenburg disaster marked the end of the age of Zeppelin. Today, airships are rarely used for commercial purposes. They are mostly used for military or research purposes. And let's not forget that the Hindenburg disaster was broadcast live over the radio. What do you think? What's your opinion on airships?